Right.
You're live.
All right, thank you, Julian. Good evening to those of you that are out there in virtual land. My name is Terry Lomax. You are looking at the virtual meeting of the Maritime Advisory Board on Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. In no particular order, except that they are on my screen this way. I will introduce Frida Wildy from the board, Rick from the board, Rick Frankie from the board, Mike Tomasini from the board, Andrew Fegley from the board, Bill Woodward from the board. Jake Iverson is a guest this evening. Also Duncan Hood from the board. We have Harbor Master Bellis, Stephen Rice from the city, Julian Jacques, our COA TV coordinator, Tammy Hook, our reporter, and last but certainly not least, Debbie Goslin from the board. So we have a quorum. We are being recorded, and with that, we will get to order or get started, and I will call the meeting to order. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes, and the agenda says from February. They're actually from April. And I had sent everybody around a couple of changes, not changes really, they were just some typos that I caught. So with that, is there a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Mr. Woodward has made that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Goslin has seconded it. And is there any other changes to the minutes that anyone wants to move or recommend? All right, hearing none, I will have everyone vote. Is there enough vote? Everyone in favor of the approval of the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? There's no opposed. Tammy, the minutes are adopted. Now let's turn to the regular or old business before the board. Mr. Frankie, anything from our friends at the county?
Actually, the meeting was very brief. It was really more an information meeting than action. Only two things were discussed: the possible impact of the NDZ and what various agencies might be doing. And there was some discussion of a possible change in county regulations for impervious surfaces in marinas, but the discussion was just simply for information. There was no action requested and no action taken.
That was pretty straightforward.
Yep, only took half an hour too.
How about that? Mr. Rice, do we have any economic development updates?
Sure, just a couple of things. The City Dock Action Committee held a work session with downtown businesses recently, and AAMRP, which is the organization that is doing the redevelopment for the new Hillman garage and redeveloping the City Dock, provided a presentation. They're currently working on a parking plan for when Hillman comes down. They're working on design concepts for a new garage, and construction is projected to start in January of next year. Hillman will come down first and be rebuilt, and then they'll work on the City Dock changes, and an interactive website will be launched in the coming days. Also, we're working with different city departments to come up with a post-recovery zone seasonal parklet application process. So a lot of the outside dining experience things that you see, particularly downtown, these tables and chairs, many of them are in what are called parklets. These are parking spaces that are owned by the city that we have made available while the recovery zones are in effect. Once the recovery zones are no longer in effect, And this is I guess the last domino of the state of emergency being rescinded at some point soon. We don't know exactly when. Our process will provide an opportunity for restaurants that would like to continue this outdoor experience to have a path to do so. So we're working on finalizing that. July 4th, the welcome back celebration and kind of reopening of the city, the weekend of festivities where economic development is working in tandem with the mayor's office on that. We put out information on how to participate with regard to having a float, and also how frontline workers can participate. The focus of this, the parade specifically, is the mayor really wants to celebrate, honor, and recognize frontline workers, from delivery drivers to restaurant waiters and waitresses, people who kept the city going, kept the economy going, and who didn't necessarily have the opportunity to dial in, for their jobs. And so they will be honorary marshals for the parade. They will march first, and the politicians and everybody else will come behind them. Just some stats from the economic development front. Our vacancy rate citywide is 5%. We've had pretty much no change from last month. We provided outreach and assistance to 41 businesses during the month of April. That's down slightly. I think we were about 61 businesses in March, but it is a good sign that maybe fewer businesses need our help. We have 5 new businesses in the city and 8 expanding or relocating businesses. We also, I don't know if it was shared, we have a new Maritime business recruitment page that is on the economic development site. And on this page, we list vacant properties or available properties within the Maritime districts. So that's it from my end.
Well, thank you. And it was interesting that you're saying the reopening of the city. If traffic backing up into Eastport, going across the bridge more recently has been any indication, some people are jumping the gun.
Absolutely.
Which is good. It's a good sign. Yes, Frida. Turn on your mic.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Stephen. When you mentioned that the businesses that have the unusual parking arrangements, like dining arrangements, either dining in the street or in parking spots that belong to the city, will residents that are affected by those be able to weigh in on whether or not they should be allowed to continue with the closed streets and using their parking lots for dining instead of cars?
So I guess there's maybe a little feedback.
You're good.
When it comes to we're not doing anything when it comes to the parking lots. And if for instance, in Eastport Boatyard, I mean, we're not doing anything on that front. So this would be restricted to areas in the city where it could be possible to move forward and either continue or roll out a new parklet and provide an al fresco, I think it's called, dining experience. So in the processes that we're looking at, and it's not codified yet or finalized, but we're looking at making sure that parking looks at it, transportation, fire marshal's office. We're looking to make sure that Public Works is involved, and there are a lot of steps. And the final the final decider, for lack of a better term, would likely be the city council, because this would be we would be renting city-owned public property to, private businesses. So the council would provide an opportunity for public input.
So this would be more akin to what's been going on at Market Square by taking a section of public property somewhere and blocking it off for that type of al fresco dining?
That's somewhat, that's a kind of a unique situation there that is probably a more complicated than what I was trying to reference. If you look at some of the stuff that you see outside on Main Street, that's the kind of thing that we have outdoor dining. It's in the street. We have the barricades. They haven't gone through they've gone through an approval process that was special with respect to the recovery zones. And so that's the kind of thing that I was really referencing.
Okay.
So it's more designed for spaces that, might make sense going forward to continue, giving them an opportunity to apply to do so. But again, we won't be operating within the recovery zone framework, so it'll be different on a number of fronts. For instance, none of the restaurants and the retailers, the few retailers who have taken advantage of this recovery zone concept, none of them have actually had to pay for these spaces during the recovery zones, because we've been operating within the framework of the emergency order. That will change once the emergency order is rescinded. We'll have another 30 days of the recovery zones, and then a new framework will have to be in place. So there will be, changes. And so I don't suspect that we will have probably as much interest going forward from the restaurants, because they will have to start paying to rent these spaces and paying the city. And, we'll have a rate for metered spaces, and then another rate for spaces that are city owned but not metered. So I suspect we'll probably see a retrenchment, but there has been considerable interest from residents and from some of the businesses as well, indicating that they would like to see continuation of some of this outdoor dining experience. So this will provide a vehicle to possibly do so.
Mr. Woodward, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I do have a question, Stephen, with regards to the old Hillman garage versus the new Hillman garage. Can you do a comparison focusing on the improvements of it, and how different will it be, and what's expected?
I'm going to defer to AAMRP, because I know their website should be launched soon. I don't believe there is a final design. I'm pretty sure there isn't a final design for the garage, but from a fundamental standpoint, I do know that there will be, I believe, 100 to 200 new spaces. And it will be, structurally sound. It will be much more resilient. It will be a lot better looking. And the renderings that I've seen have actually shown, ground floor retail and that sort of thing. So more spaces, easier to get in and out of. Ground floor retail, much prettier facade, and much safer. That I can all say with confidence.
Mr. Hug.
Yeah, just a real quick one, Stephen. We've been talking about outdoor dining in parking spaces. Is there any particular regulation for restaurants to actually be using the sidewalks in front of their places? In other words, can they continue if they wish?
So we do have an application for a sidewalk cafe permit that restaurants can apply for. And we've had that, prior to the recovery zones.
Right.
Restaurants that don't have it can apply, and some, have that license and, can use it. But with that process, similarly, the fire department looks to make sure it's safe. There are calculations with regard to ADA access for the sidewalk. Can wheelchairs get by and that sort of thing. Public Works looks at it. It goes through the departmental kind of reviews. But yes, we do have a sidewalk cafe permit that has been in existence for some time.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions for Stephen at this point?
Yeah, Terry, this is Debbie. Stephen, so the only opportunity for people to get involved in the process of what parklets and other property are going to be continued in that use is when it gets to city council. I know that you said that there are businesses and some residents who support continuing, but I've heard that there are some businesses that feel that they are negatively impacted as well. And so I just want to share whatever opportunities there are with them.
Sure. So in my experience, the pendulum was one way at the beginning, and it's kind of swung the other way. And granted, my experience is anecdotal, but depending on where the parklet is, there may be two opportunities. And let me preface this again by saying the process has not been set in stone yet, but if it's within the historic district or the historic areas, there may be it may be necessary to have HPC as part of the process, and and again, the city council would be the at least in the framework that I'm anticipating, the final decision maker. So there may be two opportunities, but it probably would depend on where the restaurant and the parklet reside.
Thank you. Thanks.
Anybody else? We'll turn to Mr. Hood about any comprehensive plan update.
Yeah, Terry, the answer is no. Last time we met, Hillary was going to do an end run and try and get me included and stuff. I've not heard anything from them, so I'm assuming nothing has happened and that Hillary did do her job. And I will follow up again with that tomorrow morning, give you guys a
So
result.
you might reach out to Eric Lashinsky, who's actually the lead on this instead of Dr. Nash, and just check with him as to what the status is.
Great.
He's been the one directly working on it.
All right, I'll do that tomorrow. Thanks.
Eric, Terry, Eric is presenting at the Eastport Civic Association on Thursday, I believe. So it might be a good opportunity if you want to get yourself an invite, Duncan. You might be able to get the information you're looking for.
And I'm assuming that's a virtual.
Yep.
Okay.
Great, I'll take care of that. Thanks very, very much, Mike.
On the task force front, I put a call into Eileen today and got a message back. They are moving forward with anticipation for introduction of legislation in June, the shape of which she did not share with me, but I haven't heard any major changes from what has been talked about in the past. I think there's a city council work session prior to the city council meeting where it might be introduced. I don't have those dates specifically, but she said the message was they have been continuing to work with the Office of Law and Planning and Zoning to get the framework in place for the legislation on the points that they seem to have consensus on. I think they're also, in addition to the actual changes in uses, et cetera, there are a number of other things that go along with it, which is sort of the public access side of things, and some other aspects that would all be part and parcel, wouldn't necessarily be all in one piece of legislation, what might be companion legislation at that point. So that's all I know at this point. I haven't seen any notice about any new task force big meeting or subpart meeting, but I suspect there'll be something going on. And Mike, you may have more information than I do.
Just a little bit. Also on the docket for the ECA meeting on Thursday, a presentation and question and answer session from the task force.
Okay.
Outside of that, there was a co-chairs meeting maybe a week ago where Eileen brought back some things that had not yet reached agreement amongst the main group, and she was looking to see, did we need to bring back a full contingent to talk about certain items? And I think generally the consensus was no, that most of the things suggested were probably beyond the scope of the whole task force. So I think that she's got it pretty pinned down to the areas of agreement and the things that she wants to propose. And we'll know more soon.
All right. On the issue of the NDZ, I sent everybody Donna Morrow's update, which was, I think, actually quite informative, because I had not seen I hadn't seen the lines drawn on a piece of paper. But I think hopefully everybody got a copy of the initial map that has been part of the NDZ application that shows the lines of demarcation where the NDZ zone would stop. It would not extend out into the bay. It looks like the lines basically connect the dots at the mouths of various rivers. For example, if you drew a line from Greenberry Point to Tolly Point, that would be the mouth of the Severn River in terms of the no discharge zone would be upriver from that line. Same thing with the South River. Just you can look at the map and you get a pretty good idea. There's a detailed list of latitudes and longitudes if you want to go to the tedious process of plotting those out. The one exception that she did, and I think I mentioned, was that Whitehall Bay has been removed from the NDZ zones. It is unclear whether or not that also would include Mill Creek and Whitehall Creek. The basis for that, and actually the criteria that was used, apparently was used primarily was, what are the availability of the pump out stations in each of the various rivers, and are there adequate pump out facilities to accommodate a no discharge zone? And I think in Mill Creek, there's only one, and that's actually at the Naval Academy, although I think it's public. And I'm not sure that there are any on Whitehall Creek. I didn't see any little dots that would indicate that, although there might be one or two up Whitehall Creek. But it looks like it goes into the Federal Register now shortly. And I saw an implementation date of like May 11th or something, or May 21st. So the state may be taking the position that it's that it's active at this point. But in any event, the other thing that came out of her what I got from her is that the focus will be on education, not enforcement, although the enforcement penalties are there. The focus is going to try to be on education. Beth, you may have a little more information than I do on that. I only have what I read, but it is moving forward, but it's on a more limited basis than we initially anticipated it would be a couple of years ago.
I mean, so two things. Anytime we put a new regulation in place, it should be 6 months to a year of education and an education style of enforcement. And then the second thing is that I'm seeing that Donna is saying that she doesn't think that the harbor master can enforce it. I mean, I wouldn't like any more jobs, but I think we can enforce it. there's a tweak to Title 15 that Ashley's working on now. So I think there's a portion of Title 15 entitled Vessels Underway. And what that section says, I don't know that off the top of my head, is that vessels will comply with state and federal law and the harbor master can enforce that. So this would fall under that. And what we had already proposed for several reasons is that it doesn't have to be a boat that's moving, right? It doesn't have to be underway. And I think everyone would agree that that's kind of silly that the boat has to be underway, like it could be at anchor. And if it's expired by 5 years, or if it's pumping waste overboard, we would want that our harbor master could say, here's your warning, or if you can't comply, here's your ticket. So I think that ultimately we will be able to enforce this, but I think we all want to do education for 6 months to a year.
Thank you. Any questions on that for Beth or me that I don't have a whole lot of answers anyway? All right, we are, I'm not
Scott
sure.
has a question.
Oh, sure, Scott.
I had a question just on the map. And I don't know how strict these boxes are, but on the Severn River, for instance, there's a gap about halfway up. And then on the South River, are these hard and fast boxes, or does it mean for the whole river? Because there's a couple of gaps in between there, and how are they handled?
Well, if you look at the map has references to basically sub-maps. Those are the boxes. They're like an inset. So then you have to go to the inset map. So for example, I think the overall map is map 10. It's called map 10. And then one of the boxes might be map 8. And that, I don't know what, I'm just guessing as to what that is, whether it's the Severn River or where it is. So then if you go in the application package to map 8, then you get a detailed map of that area, which I think I don't think there were any gaps in those that I remember.
Go halfway up the Severn River, there's an area, looks like about a quarter to a half mile it's not in any box. And then down on the South River, the same thing. There's 2 boxes. They're close, but they aren't connected. So I just didn't know what that.
I don't know. That's a good question for me to look at and to ask Donna. I did not catch that. You say it was on the Severn and on the South?
Yeah, halfway up the Severn, there's a little area that there's river, but no box.
Probably about where
On
Route
the
50.
South River, halfway up the South River, there's 2 boxes, but they aren't contiguous. They're apart from each other, and there's a little gap there. So just.
Is there a bridge? Is there a bridge where the gap is?
Doesn't appear to be. There's no bridge drawn.
Okay.
Not in the South River. On the Severn River, it may be where the Route 50 bridge is, around there.
Anyway, just a question.
Okay. Yeah. No,
Yep.
that's a good point. Because I mean, they have the official. I call it I think the official designation of the areas is all by latitude and longitude. A bunch of latitude longitude lines that out to such and such a point, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I think you may have to look at those latitude longitude lines, but I made a note to.
I think the intent's there for the whole river. Just
Yeah,
maybe the box.
I would think it would be. I wouldn't think you would have everybody congregating under the Route 50 bridge.
Could be.
Yes, Mike.
So also the map shows a bunch of existing pump out facilities, but some of them appear to be in places where it's limited not just to the general public. It's like a private marina. I noticed the one particularly behind Greenberry Point, which is a Naval Academy dock. Can anybody just pull up to that dock and pump themselves out? It's not a full service marina. There's not a fuel dock there.
Anybody can use that, but you have to have a special fitting for it.
Got it.
Of course.
That's the one on Mill Creek?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, at the Naval Academy Marina. Yeah, and Mike, I think some of those green dots are actually at community marinas that might have a pump out station. For some reason, I think like Bay Scott, maybe you know, does Bay Ridge, do they have a pump out facility at the community marina?
That's
Yes,
like
there is at the community dock.
Yeah.
and it's not on
Hey,
the,
Terry,
it's not on the drawing.
Hang on a second.
And I don't know if it's public, but it's privatized because you have to have a key to turn it on. So I'm not sure how that works.
Right. I just remember seeing a sign for it or something.
Yeah.
But yes,
hey, Terry, this is Rick. If you look at the legend of the map, the legend down in the lower left corner, the cross-hatching is the proposed no discharge zone.
right.
All of those rivers are completely cross-hatched. You're right, the boxes are not anything except map insets. Each of them is labeled with a map number. So that I don't think there really is a gap in the coverage there, because the even where the boxes are not contiguous, the cross-hatching does continue, which according to the legend is the area that's in the no discharge zone.
Okay, that helps. And I think, and if you're looking at the map, Rick, is in the legend, does it say what the distinction is between because some of those pump out stations were labeled with like COA and some of them were labeled DNR. And I didn't at first glance see what the difference was. I mean,
No, it doesn't. It doesn't really explain that at all. It just says existing pump out facility.
okay, that may be some designation that you got to drill down deeper into the application for.
A good point there on the crosshatch.
Yep. All right, I don't have, the next item is on the Burtis House. I don't have Ashley on the line, and I don't have any particular update. The only thing I did note from the minutes is that Alderman Arnett and Alderman Tierney were going to let me know if and when there was a meeting with the mayor. But I did not get any word on that, so I don't know whether that took place or not. And I don't know what the update is on if there's any update on the status of the actual transfer. Beth, I don't know if you have any more information, but I don't at this point.
I mean, I might, but I think Mike has a question.
Oh.
I had a question. Ashley actually sent an email back to the group saying that she did not have an update, that they're still working on the process, and that the finalized date is not yet available.
Yeah, I think that came out late this afternoon, Mike, right?
Yeah, it was right before the meeting, I think. Yeah.
I gotta say, I guess I should read my email then.
I mean, what I know is that our Office of Law is pushing and DNR is dragging their feet, and we're not exactly sure why, but that's what's happening.
And now that I was prompted, Ashley says, I do not have much to report in the way of the Burtis House acquisition. It is proceeding, but we do not have a scheduled date for actual transfer. So there we go.
She's very good. If she can make it happen quickly, she will.
Right. Street end upgrades. I was happy to see that we continue to have capital budget funding for certain things, and that's encouraging. But Beth, what can you tell us?
So what I can tell you is we finished at Lafayette. We're working very hard on Cheston. We've got started on 6th Street. Thompson is the next thing in our sights. We're using city money for Tucker Street. And then we also have plans for Conduit, 3rd Street, and Amos Garrett. So we have a lot on our plates. We have not been awarded our last pot of money. So we're sort of only working at Cheston right now and 6th Street because that money is there. And engineers have been assigned to those jobs. So we have a lot of good news, but with government, it never moves as fast as we would like it to.
So what is the, and I'll get to you in 1 second, Duncan. So on 3rd Street, I sent a note at, I think it was Scott's request to Public Works to find out if we could do anything. I think there was something about raising the level of 3rd Street. Wasn't that what it was, Scott?
Yeah, so the last, 20, 30 feet, Mike knows this well. But half the time when I drive down there in business, you can't, you park down there and you can't walk to the end of the street because it's underwater. So I think the street end, fix the street end up, maybe raise the land up there, Mike, a little bit, maybe back would do it. You see a lot more than I do. But it's,
So as far as the waterway goes, as far as waterway improvements go, that wouldn't be in my wheelhouse. Because waterway improvement grants only have to do with improving boater access. So that doesn't mean that I couldn't apply for a grant, which I have, and they could say, hey, we can do this. And then the city engineers would come in and say, also, we need this, this, and this. And so in order to make it accessible for boats, it might be prorated, it might be a portion of that waterway improvement that could pay for that. Also, the city could come to the table and say, okay, so you're gonna pay like 99,000 to improve this. And we're gonna pay, we can, so we've assessed this project, like an engineer's assessed it. Or maybe we've gotten preliminary bids for architecture and engineering. We know that this project costs $300,000. So they might come to the table and say, we could pay this part, waterway improvement can pay this part, but it's a little complex and it will take time.
because you could have the water part of it improved, all ready to go, but you can't get to it because you got to wade through the muck, I guess, whatever you want to call it, Mike.
So
down.
it's certainly possible that waterway improvements could pay for that, but it's sort of, it's a lot to sort of walk through to figure it all out. But
Why
it's
not?
on the
Could be-
list and it's in the existing grant request, but we have not been awarded that money yet. And to be honest, we have a hierarchy and Thompson Street comes first. And given the inflated cost of construction, I doubt that Third Street is going to be at the top. I think it's going to be, I think we're going to apply for another grant another year. I don't think that money's going to trickle. I just don't think that's going to happen based on the amount of money that waterfront projects are costing at the moment.
Right. It's who knows how it does on land there. Maybe the city has the technology and wherewithal to do it themselves through Public Works. And I think there's a little bit of the same thing at Fifth Street down there too, at the end of Fifth Street.
Based on the conversations I've had, I don't think the city has the money for that at the moment.
Mike?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been on the list. The Third Street, from the Public Works perspective, has been on the list for a very long time. It had been getting kicked down, I think, since the Moyer administration kicked down the road, so to speak, because it's not well traveled. It's a dead end, right, at the wrong end of a one-way street, so it doesn't get a lot of traffic except for people that are coming down to the two parking lots there. I was told years ago when I requested a repaving that the reason that the city wasn't spending money on repaving was because they were trying to figure out some kind of stormwater retention area similar to what's at the end of 4th Street by Annapolis City Marina with kind of a rain garden set up where if the floodwaters came in, they would basically just be feeding that setup.
I mean, to be completely transparent, no one has ever told me about Third Street. We actually made it up on our own, just driving around. Like Tyler and I just made this up on our own and said, hey, this is an area that needs attention. And so, to be honest, this hasn't been politicized and the voices haven't been loud enough. And the voices at other spots have been louder. So it's on the list, but it's not at the top of the list because it was never brought to my attention until we sort of individually decided this seems like it needs attention.
Yeah, I mean, from the waterway side, it's in pretty decent shape. There's probably some improvements that can be made there, but it's really a Public Works side of thing more than anything else.
Sort of
The street comes down in elevation probably 4 or 5 feet from the time you leave the stop sign near Roos Chris to the time you get down to the flood zone. And
I mean, I think, Mike, it's a pretty valuable spot.
Yeah.
It's a valuable spot.
I
Have
think
it be way more like friendly for the boater. So I definitely share your vision, but I just hope we can do it quickly.
So, Mike, I'm familiar with the end of Third Street at that location. It's not an area that as you say, it's at a dead end of of the street, and it's not someplace that I typically would go down. But if the push was to, as part of raising the elevation there, was to make it, to enhance it to be more of a street in park setting, i.e. public access from land to the water, or, to come down and sit by the water. Given the current political climate regarding public access, that may be the way to push those improvements as a public access issue, to make it more welcoming for public access. That would seem to be a more politically active phraseology.
It's definitely more politically active, but I don't know if the funding is there.
Well, it may not be, but at least to keep it from getting kicked down the list, and let it at least stay on the list in its currently place, as opposed to getting deferred. But your point, Beth, is well taken about it. It's not the squeaky wheel necessarily, but perhaps it can become a squeakier wheel by use of the term public access.
Yeah, I think you're right. Public access is the phrase of the day.
You've got O'Leary's parking is right there too. I don't know if it's ever blocked off, but there's a common parking area for the.
Not a lot, but the entrance into Cardi's lot does get blocked by the flooding. Everybody's got to commit to going through the big puddle. Yeah, and I think it's a fairly easy solution from the tide line, right? Even if it was just a small containment above that storm drain at the end of the street, you could probably handle most of the nuisance flooding there. Yeah, and I mean, part of the issue with selling it as a water access issue is that Cardi's very generous with her property and some of her tenants as well. So Dave's got a floating dock. Dave from Annapolis Canoe and Kayak has a floating dock down there where he just allows the general public, with the hopes that they're going to wander into his store for a gadget to launch their paddlecraft there. And so you don't necessarily need another floating dock there. And Cardi allows people to walk through her property to along the neighborhood. So it's 3rd Street gets overlooked as it's probably the closest legitimate dinghy dock to the boatyard, right? And to Roost Chris and other restaurants in Eastport. So it does get used, but yeah, I don't think it's real complex to solve the tide height issue.
Not at all.
It's just it's just a
I
matter.
mean, the money for Thompson Street and those 4 street ends is $250,000. And one would like to think that we could do Thompson for less than $250,000, at least have enough to start the architecture and engineering for 3rd. But I won't know the numbers until I know the numbers.
Beth, have you talked to Ross Arnett, since it's in his backyard, about helping to push on the land side of things?
I have not.
You might be a good person to brief on this, because a lot of his constituents will be the ones to go to the restaurants and walking around, plus the business aspect. So he might be a good ally.
Actually, Scott, he might listen to you more than he'll listen to Beth.
Amen.
So
you might give him a call and bug him about it.
I don't mind calling him about it, yeah. Because I go down there to that business across there, the business building with Atlantic Cruising Yachts, and about half the time I go there, I can't park down all the way. So it's an extra parking space getting lost, and I can't walk to the street. I have to walk back uphill, back around, and then down another ramp. Yeah. So.
And I think if you bug him, and maybe the tenants down there at Atlantic, is that Atlantic Cruising Yachts? Is that who's down there?
There's Atlantic, and there's, I think, one of the business, and there's O'Leary's, and plus.
I mean, if they collectively say, Ross, can you put this on somebody's agenda, it would take the load off of Beth, because then it's coming from the public as opposed to from Beth.
I mean, it's also not entirely clear how exactly we're supposed to converse with older persons.
Yeah, well, and that's why coming from
we can help
from somebody on the board, or Eastport residents, Mike's.
Yeah, Beth shouldn't be doing excavating on land. I don't think either. She shouldn't have that on her.
Right.
Plate.
Exactly. So I think if you follow up with him, at least initially, we might get a little more traction. And that's a nice segue into Wells Cove. Again, we don't have Ashley or anybody from the Office of Law. I don't know if there's a hearing's been scheduled on the writ of mandamus in the case. Beth, you might know a little bit more than I do, which is not much, other than the case is A, meandering, and B, that it is a focus in both the administration and Ross's agenda, and I think the ECA's agenda, to ensure that the access is maintained there at Wells Cove. That's I think there's going to continue to be a push to maintain that access.
I mean, perhaps the entire group already knows this, but just to recap, Terry, my latest information from the Office of Law is that we had a right to request a right of access. We did not request that. And so the opinion of the Office of Law is that we don't actually have an easement there. And so for that reason, my office pulled their signs because we were given a written directive, and the writ of mandamus is naming the police department, they're naming the city, they're naming me personally, and they're naming my entire office as defendants in this writ, which frankly doesn't, if you read it as a layperson, and Terry could expand on this, doesn't appear to be that scary, but I don't know how it's going to turn out.
Well, and for those of you that are not familiar with an archaic, although effective, thing called a writ of mandamus, it is a request you request a writ of mandamus from a court, and what you're doing is you are asking the court to order a public official to do that which it is required to do, and the issue is, are they required to do it or not? And if the court determines that they're required to do it and they haven't done it, it's simply an order from the court resolving that dispute and saying you are to do X, Y, or Z. So if the writ of mandamus says that the city should do X, then the city must do X, and the court sort of takes oversight on whatever X is. So that's where it that's what the purpose of a writ of mandamus is. It's sort of a way to goad a city official into action when they have either not acted or they do not believe they have authority to act, and it resolves that authority issue. So as Beth said, it's scarier that it sounds scarier than it is, and it names individuals because they happen to be occupying the position at the time, but it is not personal to them. It is personal to the position which they are occupying. So if everybody just bears with me a minute, I'm going to mute this, I hope, and maybe I won't. So I won't. Okay. That brings us to the one item of new business. I think I mentioned it before, but I was reminded by Hillary that there are, how many? Let me look here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 6 of us are up for appointment or reappointment. And I heard back from Mr. Fagley, and I'm going to follow up with Mr. Fagley. I heard back from Mr. Frankie, who has decided he does not wish reappointment. If each of you, you don't need to tell me here, but if you would email me and let me know if you are seeking reappointment. And if you are, you also need to let Hillary know directly. I don't have a vote in that appointment or reappointment process. That's done obviously by the mayor with the consent of the city council. So, but all of our terms, and the ones that she sent me were Debbie, Rick, Scott, myself, Bill, and Peter Trogdon. So if any of you, if we need to just let her know and let me know what your intentions are. So just send me an email or give me a call, in the next few days and let me know. And with that, does anybody else have any thing they want to raise that is not otherwise, that has not been on the agenda?
I just want to know if Annie's going somewhere warm, and if so, can you find me a job? I don't need that much money. And I'm not kidding.
It's getting warm here.
Stop that, Beth.
You should just come with me.
Yeah, the good news is we are approaching summer, and the bad news is, but I haven't heard any cicadas, but they too are coming.
I think they're coming.
My dog is eating them in the backyard, and it's so gross.
Oh, well, I haven't seen any, but that's maybe because when I put down 3 inches of sod just the year before they are to come out, they can't get out of it. They can't get out. All right.
Gary, are we off for August? We're on for July, but not August. Is that
that would,
tentative?
let me look and see what date, because that raises a good question. Let me just look to see what day. That would be the normal. We've sort of alternated between a July or an August date. And for some reason, I'm thinking June, July, 3rd Wednesday would be the 21st. And 3rd Thursday of August would be the 18th. So that, I guess that would be the tentative plan. Although I probably would not be here in July, but that's still reason not to stick with our August plan. Somebody would just chair that meeting that month. But I think we could tentatively plan on that. I take it you want to go somewhere. Beth, one other quick question. Are there any changes or, and I didn't, it wasn't on the agenda, but it just occurred to me when I looked at the calendar, for the Blue Angels next week?
No, it's pretty much same as it ever was.
Okay. So we still have the sort of that one designated zone, I'll call it the commercial designated zone or whatever it is.
Yes, I think it's going to look the same to everybody, but I'm nervous because everybody's been bottled up for so long. I think it's going to be well attended.
I
What
concur.
day is it, guys?
Yeah, it's going to be everybody has their new boats still from last year.
Yeah, what day of the week
Is
is
there a
that?
schedule published when they are going to actually be here on Tuesday? And
What's the restrictions? I just go by when they shut down the river, which is usually noon to 4 or something like that.
I mean, on Tuesday, essentially, it's really 10:30 until like 4. But I tell people 9:45 until 4 because it's tricky. Because if you're a public safety boat and you try to get everyone out of the zone, you have to start earlier than when it actually closes. And so it's tricky. And then the day of the show is shorter. I don't know those numbers off the top of my head. But the Capitol put out something decent. And I have like a job, like a visual aid at all my phones for my employees. So if anyone needs help, they can call us.
Mike, you happen to know, because it obviously affects you, and Debbie, you too.
I'm going to defer to Debbie. She probably knows more because we don't
Yeah.
usually just shut down for those 2 days.
Tuesday is practice day, and they generally fly over a random amount of time on Tuesday morning, usually about 10:30, and then they go away. And they are, quote unquote, scheduled to fly at 2:00 both days. But sometimes they show up earlier and sometimes they show up much later. So you never know. You're just out there listening for them and hopefully they'll be louder than the cicadas this year.
Well, typically that Tuesday morning when they come, in ones and twos are almost familiarization
Right.
loans for the pilots to get familiar with points of, where the Capitol Dome is, the turning points and things like that before the show. Hold on, we're gonna get another, this time I'm gonna go.
Hey, Beth, are you going to do an exclusion zone of the city harbor on Tuesday morning after 9:30?
So the commercial vessel spectator zone is the same on Tuesday as it is on Wednesday.
Well, I ask that because I'm supposed to be bringing my boat over to the Annapolis Waterfront Center on Tuesday, and I'm trying to figure out whether I should work around that.
So you shouldn't have any trouble.
The exclusion zone does not include the harbor.
Yeah, you shouldn't have any trouble. It might be congested, but you shouldn't have any trouble there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
You got it.
Yeah, second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Everybody have a nice evening. It's still daylight out, so go enjoy. And it's 71 degrees still.
That's wonderful.